Good morning, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make some brief remarks at the opening of this SPREP Pacific Regional Joint Preparatory Meeting for the Convention on Biological Diversity, Convention on Migratory Species and Ramsar upcoming conferences of the parties. I understand David Shepherd's not there, but I would like to acknowledge David as the Chief Executive of SPREP. He's been a fantastic partner of CITES, and we very much welcome the strength of the relationship between the CITES Secretariat and SPREP in working within the Pacific region. Also acknowledge our friends and colleagues from across the biodiversity-related conventions, in particular colleagues from the CBD, the CMS and Ramsar, and also recognise our colleagues from the UN Environment Programme, who I understand are also there with you, together with all of the governments that are represented, the regional collaborating partners and many organisations that are participating in this event. Firstly, I'd like to both thank and commend SPREP for this wonderful effort of bringing everybody together in preparing for these various conferences of the parties under these three conventions. You know, these regional preparatory meetings are critical, and we really need to see more of them as we prepare for COPs, including the next CITES COP, which will be held in the second half of 2016 in South Africa. Our COP was just held a year ago in Bangkok, Thailand, so we're more in the implementation phase, namely the implementation of the decisions and recommendations that came out of our last COP, COP16, rather than preparing for our next COP. So our contribution this week will very much revolve around implementing those decisions and how implementing those decisions contributes towards the various other conventions you're looking at this week. A couple of things to highlight. Firstly, there were some groundbreaking decisions taken at our last conference of the parties in 2013 as it relates to the interrelationship between CITES and other biodiversity-related conventions. The CITES strategic vision was extended to 2020, and within that vision, for the first time, we saw the CITES parties acknowledge the contribution that CITES makes towards the strategic plan on biodiversity, which was adopted by CBD COP10, as well as the significant contribution that CITES makes towards achieving relevant AHE targets, which are built within that strategic plan. Our COP also recognised the contribution that CITES makes to biodiversity more generally, and the importance of building CITES priorities, where appropriate, into the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, which I see as part of the discussion you have today. There was also a very important decision taken with respect to the interrelationship between the biodiversity-related conventions at a national level. It was Resolution COMP 16.4, and it was titled Cooperation of CITES with Other Biodiversity-Related Conventions. And I won't go through it all in detail, but perhaps for the purposes of this meeting, it's interesting to note that the parties recommended that there be further strengthening of the cooperation, coordination and synergies among the focal points of the biodiversity-related conventions and other partners at the national level to enhance coherent national level implementation of CITES. This is a very important message coming from our parties, very much focused on the biodiversity conventions and their coherent implementation at a national level. And when you blend that with the decision taken on our strategic vision about our contribution towards the strategic plan on biodiversity, our contribution towards the relevant AHE targets, and our contribution towards the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, you can see a very strong focus on working together as a family of biodiversity conventions through these various processes that are in place. We are represented there by our good colleague Haruko Asuku. And Haruko, good morning. We're looking forward to her making a very strong contribution to your meeting about the outcomes of CITES COP16, about our contribution towards the strategic plan on biodiversity, etc. Perhaps with a special emphasis on the new CITES listings of 5 shark species and all manta rays. These species were added to Appendix 2 of CITES at our last conference at the parties, and the entry into effect of these decisions was delayed until September the 14th to allow all parties to be ready to fully implement. Allied to that is this concept of introduction from the sea, that is taking CITES listed species from high seas and what that means and how you give effect to CITES when you are taking species from the high seas, and also issues to do with the humphead wrasse. So Haruka will there be contributing in many respects, but in particular on how we're implementing decisions coming out of COP16 and how we're contributing to wider objectives. Further to that, we have 180 parties to CITES. Our largest gap in membership is in fact in the Pacific region, and we are working very closely with SPREP to increase membership within the Pacific region. It is now written into the SPREP strategic plan, and we've been discussing providing further support to countries in the Pacific region with countries such as Australia, and some support is coming in that regard. We were also asked by our Conference of the Parties at our last COP to provide further capacity building support, targeted capacity building support, particularly to new parties and small island developing states. So we're particularly pleased to be able to contribute to this meeting, to the implementation of CITES, but in the context of the wider family of biodiversity conventions. The 3 COPs that are coming up for the CBD, for the CMS and for Ramsar are all critically important. These are all part of the architecture, the governance and legal architecture we have in place to achieve good objectives with respect to biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. We wish you well with the meeting, and I thank you again for the opportunity to make these brief opening remarks. Thank you.